Now, my name's Sam Little and I'm a solution-focused clinical hypnotherapist who works routinely with people who have some kind of anxiety, depression, also anger-related issues. Now, what I want to do for you today is first of all congratulate you for being a good friend, for taking a few moments of your time to ask yourself the question, how could I help somebody with anxiety? At the same time, how could you help yourself? Now, before we get on to any positive tips and tricks on the do's and don'ts of what you might like to do or what you might like to avoid for that matter, I need to give you some basic premise, a fundamental understanding of how anxiety is created, what happens when we create anxiety, and why being right isn't always the best course of action. Rather, being helpful is the key. So the first thing I want you to understand is that although we have one brain, we actually have two minds. We have various areas of the brain which do various different things. So originally, in caveman times, we developed with a very primitive part of the brain. And then over our evolution, we developed this huge intellectual capacity to be able to reason, to be rational, and again, to maintain some kind of an optimistic outlook, understanding that we can predict the outcomes of the things we do today so that we can turn them into something fruitful moving forward. So we're not just hunters, we're farmers, engineers. Now, of course, whenever we're operating in the intellectual part of the brain, we generally get things right in life. We always come up with answers based on a proper assessment of the situation, and we're generally very positive. But there's this other part of the brain we haven't lost, and whenever we lose that intellectual control and move down to operating within the primitive brain, then the primitive parameters kick in. There's a fight-flight response triggered by the amygdala. Now, this fight-flight response is not something in the moment that you necessarily have control over. It's a reaction, it's a response to events. Now, this is related to another part called the hippocampus, where some of our often inappropriate behavioural templates are stored. And the hypothalamus, which regulates chemical responses in the body and the mind. And at the end of the day, how you feel is a chemical process. So here we're talking about physiology, not just thought or feeling. So we have to talk about thought, feeling and physiology as one subject and how we can affect these for our betterment. Now, if we want to operate intellectually, in order to be able to work out what it is we need to do to get a better life, to feel happier, to achieve the things we want to achieve, then we have to get back up into this part of the brain. But unfortunately, what happens with anxiety, which is created by any kind of negative thinking, does the opposite. So the more anxiety we create, or in other words, the more negative thinking we do, but that could be about the future, it could be negatively forecasting the future, big things, small things, it doesn't matter. Even small things repeated over time add up to be big things. That's the same is true for the negative things as well as the positive things. So all negative thinking is converted into anxiety. Now, how many times have you beat yourself up for something you should or shouldn't have done in the past? Should or shouldn't have said? All this is where your anxieties come from. And all that anxiety is accumulated. It's accumulated and stored in what we call the stress bucket. So all anxiety goes in there, and unfortunately, sooner or later, if you keep putting it in there, it will overflow. And that could be a panic attack. That could be binge eating or drinking. That could be a whole manner of physiological things that we feel, headaches, IBS. In every case, it represents, to some degree or another, a lack of control. So you see, stress and anxiety related to how much control we then have. So, if we want to do better in life, we have to have enough control to be able to see things clearly and take the appropriate course of action to fix the problem. But unfortunately, the solution to the problem is never found within the problem. It's always found outside of the problem. And what tends to happen is that many of our clients find themselves obsessing about the same problem, the same reasons why they can't do something, the same fears, the same anxieties, the same troubles about the traumas of the past, reliving them, repeating them, thinking of them again and again and again. And as we've already said, all this negative thinking is what creates the anxiety. So if we want to get better at not being anxious, we have to get better at changing the subject. And that's where you as a friend are perhaps the best placed person to be able to help. Now, all you need to do, and I say this with a little bit of reluctance, all you need to do is change the subject. You don't need to buy into the story. Of course, you acknowledge it. You are tactful with how you do this. But when your goal, when you have a specific goal of getting that person to be more positive, to notice the things in their lives which are already positive is a good starting point. Noticing where the exceptions lie. Don't ask them if they've had a good day when you know perfectly well they haven't. They'll tell you about how terrible it was. Ask them what was good about their day. What did they enjoy? What was the best thing in the last week? Try and get a smile out of them. Because that's the behaviour that needs encouraging. You don't need to get serious. You can talk about inconsequential things. Tell them some positive tales about your life. Don't hide them. Don't rub their face in it. But there's a lot to be said about talking about the weather. Inconsequential information. Even the smallest of things are looked past. The smallest of positive things are discounted so easily in an anxious person. Failing that, show them this video, explain to them this mechanism. Explain to them that it's their thinking which creates the anxiety, how they respond to the situation, and not the situation itself. And if you have any more questions, you like any help, or any personal help, feel free to get in touch. You'll find our contact details on this page. Thank you very much.